Thanks for joining us for this talk. I'm going to start with a brief introduction about these talks we're doing, and an introduction of Porto Academy and your work, and then we can proceed with a talk. I'm sure the audience is eager to hear from you guys. So this is part from Porto Academy Talk Club that started in June 2nd, and it's going on until July 19th. It's a series of talks managed by me. I'm the managing editor of Art Daily Brazil, was invited from Porto Academy, by Porto Academy to deal with that, together with my friend Pauline Personeni, in charge of the editorial development of Aguiar Publishers and its digital platform Urban Next. So we both are talking with the guests of this edition of Porto Academy. For those who already doesn't know, Porto Academy is a platform that involves lectures, visits to architectural sites, classes, exhibitions, and publications as well. Since its start, more than 2,000 participants had been part of the editions from almost 90 different nationalities. So it's a lot of people that participated, with more than 150 guests from 30 different nationalities. It's a very international cast. Porto Academy proposes a powerful cultural and education experience in dialogue with some of the most globally relevant architects, practitioners, artists, and professionals that are expanding the field of architecture, just like our guests of today. One quote that is interesting, and I like to start with, from the Porto Academy website, is we admire the figures that dream about architecture, and that's why we have Luís Lemoine and Bêka for this talk today. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure the audience will appreciate as well. I have prepared a brief introduction of your work. I don't think it's absolutely necessary because you're well known already. I think the audience knows your work quite well, but let's do it. You guys have been working together from the last 15 years, merging architecture with new narratives and cinematographic language, which is really interesting. Focusing in what some people could call the anthropology of the ordinary, casting light on not only in buildings and places, but in the life that takes place within these spaces, which makes your work especially relevant for architecture and urban field nowadays. You have presented your films in several major events, like the Venice Biennale of Architecture Biennale, the Oslo Triennale, the Seoul Biennial of Architecture and Urbanism, and the Performa 17 in New York, among many others. In 2016, Bêka Lemoine's work has been acquired by the MoMA in New York, the Museum of Modern Art, for its permanent collection, which is absolutely fantastic. You guys have been laureate Villa Kujoyama, the French residency program for artists in Japan, and in 2018, Bêka has been laureate the Italian fellow at the American Academy in Rome. Besides that, Bêka and Luís Lemoine have been invited professors at Columbia University, Academia de Arquitetura di Mendrisio in Switzerland, the Berlage Center in Delft, the Netherlands, and in Head Institute in Geneva. And you are currently teaching at the AA School in London. Quite an impressive resume of this duo. And I took one quote from your website that I found quite interesting to start this conversation. The way we represent our buildings shapes the way we build it. So we can start hearing from you guys about this quote, and also your interest in the relationship of cinema and architecture, and the representation of not only built space, but especially lived space.
Yes, the quote you just gave is, in fact, is in response of a very famous quote for architects and students. That is the quote by Winston Churchill. That he said. He said that we shape our building shape our lives afterwards. So it's why we said this, because we understood from the beginning of making films is that it's so important that the way we represent the architecture and the space, because we create a kind of imaginary about space and architecture in our head, and after that also it's very important for students in architecture is that this imaginary, that this kind of imaginary that we have in mind will create the new world that we are going through. So in a way, the building and the architecture we are creating is based on what we already have in mind. We see this very well when with the architects, with the student architecture, where in the school where we teach that. When we talk about, and we ask to make some exercise about architecture, they always have some references in mind that are references, visual references that are so strong. And they are many times, most of the time, they are pictures, pictures of film, of images, moving images. And so we have understood from the beginning that if we want, in a way, in an optimistic idea, if we want to change a little bit our future in terms of space and architecture, we can start to change the way we imagine the buildings and the space. And the way we imagine is focusing on the images, so we have to change the images. And changing the images means that we have to, for our idea, we have to be closer to the reality of what we see in the world, and not closer to a kind of ideal world that doesn't exist. This ideal world is the world that we find in all the magazines about architecture or website, everywhere, the images that we find online. It's a kind of world that is created by photographs that are paid by the architects, they are paid by the promotion of the building. So this is something that is normal to have this, but what is not normal for us is to have just this kind of image. So we wanted to create a sort of balance between this promotional image of architecture with a real one, a new one, and more realistic. Because I studied architecture, and what I found all the time is the architecture that we were talking about during my studies inside the School of Architecture. I couldn't find it in the world, just outside my school. I have just to make maybe very long trips to go to see one building that is in my books, but the books that I was studying, that I was using for studying architecture, they were only about this building. So it's an ideal world that is a collection of beautiful and wonderful architecture, but this is not the world I found outside the school. So maybe we said this, we have this quote saying, let's start to represent architecture and in general the space differently. We started with our first film with a very famous house by Rencolas that it was already very famous, so you can find all the beautiful images you need about this house. But we wanted to give another lecture, a different lecture, a lecture of this house, a different reading, a different image that is an image of a space that is related to a body also, because it's very rare to find in the representation of architecture this relationship between the space and the body and the human body. So we wanted to start from there, and so we chose this lady that is she has a fantastic, very interesting presence, and we started just to follow her to show that what is maybe interesting also in architecture is not really the design of the building, it's not the aesthetic, but it's also the relation that you can find, that you have with your body, with the space. And this film is, this film is also is about this. The big topic of this film is how can we observe the relationship of the body with the space. And through this relationship, we also found that what is very interesting is also the emotion that the space can give to people that stay inside. So there's something that we don't perceive in the representation of architecture, we don't perceive in the photograph normally, and you can perceive it very strongly when you visit a place, visit a building, an architecture, or even not in architecture, but a space. So you perceive something very, in a very sensorial point of view. You feel a space, a place. So we wanted to translate this in a film, just to underline that there's something, there's many things more to talk about the space, more than only the image.
Yeah, if the recent history of architecture presentation was very much about disembodiment, we really wanted to do totally the contrary. So a re-embodiment of architecture representation, and this goes through what was Ila, replacing the human figure at the very center, but also focusing on all the forgotten topic related to not only emotions and sensoriality, but also how architecture impacts our well-being or the contrary, or our ability to be together, to create sense of community, or to help people in this community feeling, if we talk about large buildings, or let's say the social dynamic within architecture.
So yes, let's change the representation first, and let's see if something is changing afterward.
Or if it contributes in any way.
I find this movement absolutely beautiful, and what Luis mentioned about the re-embodiment of architecture. No, this is something that it's not specifically or only from modernism. You know, it's century long since the invention of perspective. People have been taken off the representation of space, and one thing that comes to my mind when I watch your films, and I mentioned that in an interview we did for Art Daily last year. Very interesting moment to think about your work. It's that your films are not about architecture or urban spaces. Your film, in my opinion, your films are about people living spaces of architecture and spaces in the cities. So there's this shift, and it's very interesting to hear from you guys that this movement is not enclosed solely in the representation, but there's an architectural intent to that, and this quote serves this purpose. You know, hearing from you, I understand that this is actually an architectural exercise. The ultimate intention is to change the space through representation. What do you think?
You're totally right, but I think, and that's let's say our also pleasure, is to see that in terms of diffusion, our films can reach an audience that is not properly architectural, or it can be broader. I mean, we have the real pleasure of going through many systems of distribution, which can be documentary cinema, or the art scene, or all the more architectural ones. So that's to say that I think the question, when you open up a little bit the issue, the question, not only to a proper architectural one, but you open it to the wider question of how us as the individuals we relate to space in general in a more, like, say, abstract way, or very material way, but space in general, not only design or only question of design. I think this also interests many more people than just the world of architecture. And so that's really the intent. And for instance, the current days, in these past months, we have been working on a book project of discussions with architects and also artists working on the edge of architecture about that, but a bit of a universal question of how we relate physically to space and how space is really able to provoke emotions and address our senses, and how architects make use of that, how they work with this in order to find a language that address our bodies or our, let's say, material beings. Let's say. And so that's, I just mentioned this because I think it's interesting to see how questions that we think are enclosed into architecture schools or architecture world actually are very much are broader in terms of the ability to speak to people and audiences.
Totally. Let's for the audience that probably doesn't know your history before the practice, I just skipped this question as the first one, but I think it's interesting to hear from you guys. What led you to dedicate the career after, you know, you're trained architects, right? What led you to dedicate to the Louise is not? What's your background?
I'm not, which sounds like an heresy, you know. But I trained as an art historian, and then with Ila when I was finishing my research, which had to do with cinema, and, and so we started working on films because Ila already quitted architecture for long years before. And I joined some project of his, and then we moved to making films together on questions of space and architecture. But it was like side project at the time because Ila was making fiction films, so not a lot to do with the architecture on the frontal way. Even if now retrospectively you can see a lot of things that then grew up later in our films, but. Yeah, we thought there was really, because architecture was a common interest we had together, and we thought that could be really a field to investigate. We thought that probably there were not many contradictory voices in the field of architecture representation, and so we thought that potentially there was a lot to experiment. So that's how we started. And with the first film, then we understood that the response from the public was so rich and interesting that we thought, oh, it might be interesting to go a little bit further and see what we could do and develop. So that's how it all started.
And the first film was Kuho's house life, isn't it?
Kuho's life, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it had a global. It was. It's now worldwide. You know, I watched this movie when I was in the architecture school here in Brazil, so I assume it's everywhere.
we are so old, no? Because we find people. I've seen Are you there? When I saw the film when I was at the elementary school. Yes, really.
It made me feel, yeah.
We feel very old.
No, it's not. Yeah, quite some years ago already, but not that old. And this film, and thinking about the scope your work or you're interested in, this film is an example of a work that is focused in the life within a house. And on the other hand, Tokyo Ride is a film about one day with Hiro Nishizawa in Tokyo and his absolutely gorgeous car, and you had the chance to go there. And on the other hand, there is this series, Homo Urbanus, about different cities. So you're working in through the same language, cinema and moving image, in very different scales. Can you talk about these differences and how these offer different perspectives through this for these experiments Louise was saying?
Yes, let's say that we are completely open to understand in every field of related to space, to understand, let's say, always the same thing, that it's how we can have a better relationship to space. And that is something so theoretical even now, that is there's a lot to do, we think, a lot of work to do with for understanding that the relationship that we can have with the space, that could be in architecture or in the nature, but is so strong that and so powerful, even like music or any other art like painting or sculpture, because even more, we think that even more the potential that has the emotional potential that the space has is incredible, but we are not aware of this because we are not prepared. We have not been educated for that. So we need to be aware of this this sensation to be ready to feel more and more intensely. So we try to work with the film that for us is one of the best, better medium, better way to do this. But the aim is always the same. Is let's try to put more sensitivity on this topic. That is, when you go inside a place or a space, when you go inside a building, there's some moments that are so strong that if you are able to feel these emotions, it's something that can change your behavior, can change even your life. So changing the behavior is something that we can understand immediately with the music. If you are a little bit sad, you put a music that you like and you remember your love, or you remember, or it's something that you push you to dance. So you change your behavior very, very, very fast. The music is magical for this. You can change your behavior very, very fast. But also going in a museum and watching a beautiful Picasso can really move you very, very, very strong, no? And you can change your behavior. You can even have, starting from that revelation, have even a better life, no? We can say this. But we cannot say this of a space. No one says this, no? But if you remember very well, that is something that we are very interested in the book we are making now. We are always asking all these architects that we meet, talking about the house of your childhood, for example. And the house of your childhood is so strong for us, even if we didn't know. No, we don't know why, but you have so strong memories about that place. And but now, only now, you realize how was strong in that moment. So we can imagine that we can be also educate also ourselves and also our our kids, our children, to be very sensitive about this. And the space is incredible. I'm sure all of you, even you have some very strong example of moment that you spent in some space, some architecture, some building that really change your behavior or even your life. But this could happen more often if you're really concentrating this, if you think about this, if you see at your life in this key, in this kind of
being fully receptive and present, to what you experience.
Yeah, to learn how to be more receptive to space. This is something very, very important to, I think, from students of architecture. This has to be mandatory, I think. No, this is mandatory from the first year of first year of School of Architecture, is to push them to become the expert of the feeling of the space, to know what is the feeling of space, and how also after that create spaces that can create feelings also. But not only about architecture. Is not something that is related to architects and student architecture. It's related to everybody, because we spend all our life in architecture. We spend all our life in the city. We spend all we are born in an architecture. We will die in an architecture. We will spend all our life in architecture. And so, can you imagine if you make a comparison with the music? It's like we had a music 24 hours a day. No, we stay 24 hours a day in architecture. Can you imagine if it was the same for the music? You have to be very careful what kind of music you put it, no, because you cannot stand a very bad music for 24 hours a day. No, you will say, "Are you crazy? I have to listen to this music 24 hours a day." But you accepted to do it with the space. Why?
I cannot agree more. It's absolutely. It happens all the time, right? You watch. When I was doing classes. Actually, when I was teaching classes, I tried to take walks with the students, and during these night walks, it was a night course. So, the classes were during night. We were walking in a residential neighborhood with some medium to high rises, and I pointed to the little windows, with the interior lights, appearing, and the amount of residences here in Brazil with this cold white light. It was due to the some years, like decades ago, it was advertised as more economic, and I was watching it from the streets and telling the students, if only they could know that if they changed it for warmer lights, their lives would be happier. People would probably pay more attention to that, because it really, those subtle aspects has a very deep impact in people's lives, and it's absolutely not perceived overall in general.
Yeah, and exactly. That's the point. Yeah, totally. Why they accept, but they could not accept other things, no?
Yeah, it's somehow this inherently publicity of architecture, it's present with us, but with everybody 24/7, makes us somehow accept unacceptable things that otherwise in other arts or other fields would not be as easily accepted. Makes me think about something that you guys said in the interview. It was actually the title of the final title of the interview in our published on Art Daily. We made a psychoanalysis of space, and it has a lot to do with this subjective aspects of space and its impacts in people's lives.
we like a lot to say that we will act like a psychoanalyst, but I don't know if we are really good at that. But it's a kind of auto-analysis, I think. So it's we make film to understand ourselves a little bit more about this. It's the psychoanalysis of a space is an expression that we like a lot, but it's just to understand that it's a kind of title to say that we can understand a lot about the space talking about something else. It's started with this idea. When you make an analysis, you go to an analysis, psychoanalysis. You go in a place that is very important. How is it the architecture of the place and the structure of the place? But you start talking about anything you want. No, is what is important is talking. Is talking, just to let the things go out and listening yourself to that. We make films in the same way. We don't prepare the film before. We don't know how will the film will be. We just let ourselves making the film as we were in a psychoanalysis. And after that, during making the film, and after also, if the film is finished, we watch the film to try to understand what came out from ourselves, no? And it's also it's a kind of it's a kind of self-analysis. But in the same time, we also understand that doing this, the people we have in front, they do the same also, no? Because they see that we are in a psychoanalysis ourselves. So they sometimes when it happens, that is the magic happens, they do the same. So we are both in this kind of psychoanalysis. And so what is very interesting, it happens very, very often in our film. We start talking about something else, like a dog that is just passing by, and talking about this dog. We at the end we understand incredibly how the square works and how the design of the architect changed the behavior of the people on the square. It's very interesting how to not to go straight forward to a topic to try to understand to get the information on the truth, to describe something, but just to take a very a wandering line to you don't know where are you going. You just talk about anything, and at the end, that's is incredible. The surprise that you will understand something about the place or the space where you are, just because we are talking about love or music or other things. We made this film about with Moriyama-san in Tokyo. We never talk about space, but we think that is one of the best films we made about space, because we don't have to talk about the space, because just watching a body moving inside the space, a house in that case, or just observing someone that is making a barbecue, or just watching a film on the roof or something else, you can understand in
his pleasure of living there.
Yeah, what is a very strong relationship with space, and he has an incredible strong relation. He decided, just watching him, you understand that, for example, he decided which place of the house is the best to read the book that he's reading, and based on the topic of the book. So he decided, he started reading a book, and he says, this is a book for the roof. This is a book for the basement, and this is the book because he has a very strong relationship with the spaces of the house. And this is you don't need to explain it. You just stay with him and you understand it. And maybe it's stronger that because this is starting from my studies, and also Louise's studies, that we don't really like the teacher that they have the truth to explain to the other. No, you have to do this, you have to do this. I have very doubts about this kind of teacher that they explain how to do things. So we always try to avoid to explain things. No, we don't want to explain anything. We just want to share an experience that we had. And if you are interested, you watch it and you like it. If you are not interested, we don't have to explain anything to anyone.
it's a very fruitful and open approach, I would say. I like it a lot.
It requires a lot of participation from the people we film. So if there is in front of us someone who is totally closed and doesn't open up, it doesn't work. So that's why we take the biggest effort we do is finding people with whom we can open these psychological doors. That's explained the psychoanalysis behind. Yeah.
Sometimes we say that we make film for intelligent people, and someone asks us, but why? Because you are against the people that are not intelligent? No, is the opposite. We say that we make film for the intelligent people because we respect the intelligence of the other, and we think that everyone is so intelligent to understand things alone. It doesn't need a stupid voiceover that explain everything. You are watching this, you are watching this. So we consider all the people so intelligent, and we respect their intelligence, and for that we don't have a kind of explanation voice that is something that we really don't stand in the other films.
Fair enough. Amazing. Guys, we are start running out of time. And I don't want to take all your afternoon, but one last question. If you could just give some clues about what you're going to talk about in this edition of Porto Academy for the audience. I bet everyone, including me, is curious.
But if we respect our methodology, it's all about improvisation. So we should bring stuff and invent on the spot. But
it's like we are
DJ
thinking about doing it in the future, something like this. It's a kind of create musical creation. So we start with the note, and after that we will create a kind of a song at the end. So we will see. But in a jazz wave of making film, making music, so improvisation will be very important. Yeah,
the jam session lecture.
Amazing.
Yeah, would have loved to constantly think he has missed his real career. He wanted to be a musician. So I think now we should quit the typical lecture kind of format in order to do like a concept lecture.
Yeah, it could be fantastic. Yeah.
So probably he will do his guitar.
Amazing. Perfect.
Okay.
Guys, thanks a lot for your participation. We are reaching the end of this talk. It was an absolute pleasure. The first time I met you in live. Actually, it's live, but it's a virtual talk. And it was an honor to me, really. I really appreciate your work. Just to conclude with this talk, Porto Academy is open to all students and professionals worldwide, and this edition will happen from July 20th to the 27th in the Faculty of Architecture in the University of Porto, designed by Álvaro Cisa Vieira. The guests of this edition are Diogo Aguiar Studio, Salottobuono, Clancy, David Kohn, Raphael Kadid, DFDC, Mau Architecture, Bêka Lemoine here today with us, Walder, Nickisch, WOJR Experience, and Léonard Kadid. For the audience, stay tuned in the Instagram of Porto Academy, because the schedule for the next talks will be published in the feed, on the feed. And that's it. Thanks again, Luis. Thanks, Ila. It was a pleasure.
Thank you to you.
See you.
Bye-bye, guys.